Hi everyone, I am J, the author of JMware.com, and now I will show you how to implement hooks in a new React.js application that consumes data from the REST API. Because hooks are a new addition in React 16.8, so make sure your Create React app application updates to the latest version. Implementation of these React hooks will be used data to fetch from the REST API. Don't worry, we already prepared a simple REST API using Node.js, Express.js, and MongoDB that you can find in the description below. This tutorial divided into several steps. Step number 1. Install and create React app. Step number 2. Add React router DOM. Step number 3. React hooks and Axios fetch from the REST API. Step number 4. React hooks and Axios pulls to the REST API. Step number 5. React hooks and Axios put to the REST API. Step number 6. Run and test the React hooks web app. The React hooks lets you use states or other React features without writing a class. Hooks are functions to hook into React state and lifecycle features from function components. Hooks don't work inside classes because hooks let you use React without classes. The following tools, frameworks, modules, and libraries are required for this tutorial. Node.js, find the recommended version, React.js, Express.js, and MongoDB REST API. Terminal for Mac or Linux, or Node.js command line for Windows. IDE or text editor. We assume that you have already installed Node.js. Make sure Node.js with npm or yarn command line is working on Windows or runnable in Linux or Mac OS X terminal. Step number 1. Install and create React app. The Create React app is a tool to create a React.js app from the command line or CLI. So, you don't need to install or configure tools like Webpack or Babel because they are pre-configured or hidden so that you can focus on the code. Open the terminal or Node.js command line, then go to your React.js projects folders. We will install the React.js app creator for creating a new React.js app easily. For that, type this create React app command. Sudo npm install g create React app. Now, create a React app by type this command. Create React app React hooks app. This command will create a new React app with the name React hooks app. And this process can take minutes because all dependencies and modules also installing automatically. Next, go to the newly created app folder. cd React hooks app. Open the projects in your IDE or text editor. For Visual Studio Code, type these commands in the terminal or command lines under that project's directory. Code. Now you see the contents of package.json. We are using React versions 16.12.0, React DOM 16.12.0, and React scripts 3.3.0. It means that the React versions is the versions that already uses React hooks as default. Now, SRC app.js doesn't use class anymore. For sanitizations, run this React app for the first time by type these commands on the terminal. Yarn start. And here we go, the latest React.js application that uses React hooks with the same page as usual. Step number 2. Add React router DOM. We will use multiple pages for implementing CRUD operation for each REST API request method. To add the required components for CRUD operation, type these commands, including creating a new components folder. Next, we have to install or add the required modules for React Router DOM for routing or navigation, and React Bootstrap for styling the UI or UX. Yarn add React Router DOM. Yarn add React Bootstrap and Bootstrap. Next, open and edit SRC index.js. Then add these imports of router and route React Router DOM before the index.js import. React Bootstrap's components will be used in each created components individually. Unfortunately, the stylesheet or CSS does not include in the React Bootstrap installations. For that, open and edit public/index.html, then includes this Bootstrap CSS from CDN before the closing of the head tags. Also, import these created components after the register service worker on index.js. Next, add a router to the React DOM render. This router contains each route to the components. Next, we will modify this RC app.js to be the root of application with the React Bootstrap navigation bar. Add this import before the app.css import. Replace the existing render components with the React Bootstrap nav and navbar components. The navbar contains the navigations to the route, list, and create routers. Step number 3. React hooks and Axios feeds from REST API. To access or consume the REST API service, we will use Axios, the promise-based HTTP client for the browser and Node.js. Axios features makes email HTTP requests, make HTTP requests, supports the promise API, intercept requests and response, transform requests and response data, cancel requests, automatic transforms for JSON data, client-side support for protecting against XSRF. To install the Axios HTTP client library, simply run this command: npm install save Axios. Next, open and edit this RC components list.js, then add the React hooks, use state and use effects to existing React import, and add imports of Axios, React Bootstrap, list group, spinner. Create the main function of the list with injected props. At the end of the file, add list export modules as the footer wrap to the list functions. Next, fill the functions brackets with the React hooks use state that declares the data, set data, show loading, set show loading, constant variables. Add a React hooks use effects method or function that fetch data from REST API using Axios, then set response to the data constant variable. Add a method or functions to navigate to the details or show page with an ID parameter. Implements the render components that contain a React Bootstrap list group and spinner, which the list group iterates data from the data constants of the React hooks use state. List items in the list components are clickable and navigates to the show component. For that, open and edit is RC components show.js. Then make similar imports, main functions, export functions, constant variables, methods, React hooks use state, use effects, and rendered components as list components, except for the show component, only show a single data as an object. Also, use React Bootstrap Jumbotron to the method or functions that use in this show component are creating a product and navigation to the edit components with an ID parameters. Step number 4. React hooks and Axios post to REST API. Now, we will implement the React hooks form. The form components we use React Bootstrap form and form group. Open and edit is RC components create.js. Then add these imports of React hooks use state, use effects, Axios, React Bootstrap Spinner, Jumbotron, Form, Button, and React Routine DOM with Router. Create the main functions with the injected props. At the end of the file, export the function and wrap it with Router. Declare the constant variables inside the main function brackets that implementing React hooks useState and a REST API URL. Add a method or functions to post data to REST API using Axios, then push to the show components after a successful response. Add a method or functions that handles the onChange event from the form input. Here we will use a simple React hook style that sets the set to a data or object. Now we will implement the rendered components that contains React Bootstrap form, form groups, and form control that controlled by onChange event. Attention! Don't forget to add the name to the form control, otherwise the onChange event functions doesn't work. Step number 5. React hooks and Axios puts to REST API. Similar to the previous React hooks form to post data, the form components for edit data will use React Bootstrap form and form group. Open and edit is RC components edit.js. Then add these imports of React hooks useState, useEffects, Axios, React Bootstrap Spinner, Jumbotron, Form, Button, and React Routine DOM with Router. Create the main function with the injected props. In the end of the file, export that functions and write by with Router. Declare the constant variables inside the main function brackets that implementing React hooks useState and a REST API URL. Add React hooks useEffects to load or get data from the REST API using Axios, then set the response to the products object. Add a method or functions to put data to REST API using Axios, then push to the show components after successful response. Add a method or functions that handles the onChange event of the form input. Here, we will use a simple React hook style that sets the state to the data or object. Now we will implement the rendered components that contain React Bootstrap form, form groups, and form control that controlled by onChange event. Step number 6. Run and test the React Hooks web app. Before running the React Hooks web app, first we have to run the MongoDB server and Node.js REST API server. Open the new terminal and tab the Run the MongoDB daemon. Open a new tab again, then go to the Node.express REST API server, then run this command. Now you can run the React Hooks web app in its current terminal tab. Yarn start. You can see the React.js application demo by clicking the YouTube links in the description. That's it. You can see the article, source codes, and demo application in the description. If you like this React.js tutorial, you can click like, share, comments, and subscribe to our channel to make more power for the next tutorial. Thank you and see you next time.